Hello, everybody. I'm sitting here with the rather wondrous Mr. Marvellous Adam Steele. How are you, Adam?
I am good. Thank you very much, Warren. Thanks to the magic of the internet, we are, in fact, sat next to each other virtually.
No, I thought you were here. Hey, buddy. No, wait,
Hey.
one way around. Hey, wait there. Hey, buddy. Wait, I just got all small. Wait, I don't know how to do this. Yep. I didn't even shave for this. Oh, dearie me. Look at that. I'm sorry. But you did. You strategically shaved for your Sir Francis Drake Walter Raleigh look there. Very yes.
You say that. I've not actually shaved the sides in a week, but my strange skin complexion, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yes. You, my friend Patch and you share that kind of the rosy, cheeky kind of...
Yes.
Yes. Well,
as you can see me on camera, I look kind of pink. That is actually my skin color when you say anything that makes me react in any way.
I totally believe it. I mean, being British English myself, I have two colors. I have white and in the sun red. And yes. Any illusion of a suntan is just because Eric has the light up here, which has a little bit of a yellowy kind of golden color. But my actual skin color is closer to, that.
Me too.
So what we decided to do is, so Eventide have this new bundle out and they're doing like a deal on it. And we were like, well, why don't we test it and mix a song using just their plugins? And then we were like, well, what song should we mix? Well, Adam just did a full cover with some very good friends of ours, of course, Mr. Jamie Humphreys. Hey, Jamie, if you're watching, I spoke to Jamie earlier this morning, obviously. And he played the guitars on it. And the drummer was a friend of yours. Is it Cameron? How do you pronounce his last name? I don't want to mess it up.
Cameron Fleury. Yes.
Fleury. Okay.
Yes. It's a friend of mine, a very good metal drummer. So there's something interesting I'll be talking about the drums when we get to that.
Well, we'll probably start off with drums and stuff like that. The way we've got the tracks up here, if Eric wants to show, is I just imported them. The two things I will say off the top here is the tracks are just imported completely. Everything's at zero. Because I haven't listened to this. Obviously, I heard your mix. And I have not done any prep. And I have not even used all the new Eventide plugins. So I thought this is the way I do demos. You know, the way I do demos is I just start using them. I've always told people I may have spent my whole life making records, and that's fantastic. But I've always approached it from I don't know, let's just start and see what happens. And I feel like that's the dumb guy in me is most of us. You know.
Yeah.
All the women I know that are audio engineers are so much more organized than us. I mean, they will read the manual, they'll get into the details. Melissa, if you're here, Melissa, is super organized and really knows everything inside out. Just really, really incredibly competent. Me, on the other hand, I'll just kind of plug it in and go, I wonder what this does. So I'm applying that theory here to mixing this song. I am going to just open up. It's going to be a voyage of exploration, and I'm obviously going to ask Adam's opinion and talk a little bit how it was recorded as well. I mean, this is obviously, Adam, this is a masterpiece and one of the most famous Rush songs ever.
I certainly agree. It's a fantastic song, but me being a massive Rush fan, I wanted to try and get each of these parts as close to the original as I reasonably could. And I've been a Rush fan for so long that being an audio nerd I was a Rush fan 15 years before I knew what a DAW was.
Right.
So for me, this song was like, I can hear exactly all the little parts and all the little breakdowns. And so there's more in there than you think, but still what I've sent over as the multi-tracks is relatively Spartan. This is, I've tried to make it so it would be as it came off the tape. So if there's anything like the synths, they're tracked so they're not MIDI, they're an audio stem. All that kind of stuff is done so that you can just hit play and it shouldn't sound unreasonable. But then the mixing is the separate bit, and that's kind of the way I've thought about this. So like the bass, for example, it had a DI and an amp, so you've got those as tracks. No mixing per se, but rather than having to do all the work like a modern guy might do with virtual stuff, it's like it would be on the tape.
Right, absolutely.
So that's what I've tried to do.
No, it's absolutely fantastic, and you know, I didn't really properly introduce Adam because he's been on the channel numerous amounts of times, and you know, if you're members of Pro Mix Academy as well as Produce Like a Pro Academy, you'll know that he has one of the defining Reaper courses. It's a very successful course because it frickin' rocks, and Adam knows Reaper inside and out. So if you haven't already, please go and subscribe to Pole Studios. That's HOPPOLE Studios. I'm assuming of all those words you can spell studios. But anyway, so please go and subscribe to him. He's one of our featured channels anyway on the page, and you'll always see his name underneath. Yeah, Adam's super talented. He's a multi-instrumentalist. Pretty good drummer as well, where I'm a terrible drummer. And we did what cover did we do together? We did
Turn It On Again.
Turn It On Again. Yeah. Just talking to Jamie this morning about doing more Genesis covers, and we thought we would get really crazy and do some like stuff off Nursery Crime. Woohoo! So that's going to be great. Yeah. But yeah, if you haven't already, please go and follow Adam. So Eric, let's get back to looking at the tracks. I'm going to ask some dumb questions. So what pre's did you use? What were you tracking through on this?
So the drums, I didn't track them. Cameron tracked them over in Toronto.
I forgot, yeah. What did he use?
They were done, would you believe it, with a Focusrite 18i20.
I don't know that particular Focusrite, but yeah.
It's one of the Scarlets. It's budget level, simple stuff, and it still sounds pretty decent. One thing that I will say is the kick drum. This is where I'll talk about the drums. The kick drum is not the kick drum that he sent me. Because being a metal drummer, he didn't have a microphone in the kick drum. He had a trigger. Because most of the stuff that he does is machine drum stuff. And so what he sent me was from his drum brain, and it sounded kind of bad. It sounded like a machine gun, which if you're doing that kind of metal is fine. But what I did before I sent this over and before I did my own mix is I used a trigger detection. And I actually used a kick drum from Superior Drummer, so a real sounding kick, and kind of substituted that in. Because in lieu of having a real kick drum mic, I substituted an unprocessed, raw, real sounding kick drum.
Right.
So I kind of unsampled it, if you will.
That's
it's something I've had to do a couple of times where you've got metal drummers who've only got a trigger and you want to make it sound more real. There is no amount of EQ that will make sound real again. Yeah,
so tell me again. So what sample is this? Treat me like an idiot, because I am.
So you're not hearing what I got sent. What I got sent was some Roland clicky metal thing.
Understand that, yeah.
All the velocities were 127. It was metal. Right. So I fed it into Superior Drummer using one of Reaper's inbuilt trigger detectors.
Nice.
So it turned it into MIDI and then turned that back into, I think it was a 24-inch Pearl kick drum. So as close to what Neil Peart was using at the time as I could get.
Right.
So it sounds like a nicely recorded kick drum with no processing.
Now with the snare top, not to be critical, but I can tell that it's squaring off on the mic pre.
Yes, I think that may well be. That is how I received it. So I think that might be a limitation of the preamps this is one of the things that I think we get with higher quality preamps is it lets transients through, you get more dynamics.
Yeah.
It was an incredibly loud snare that he was using. It was quite a high-tuned brass snare, so a real dinger, which you would think would be inappropriate for a song like this, but I found that Neil Peart was always a fan of a really high-tuned snare drum that he would just smack with all of his weight. And somehow that was the Rush sound. So it was actually kind of appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like, buying 2112s, Permanent Waves, those records when they came out as a little kid. When I went to see Rush, I would say they were a lot more rock than you anticipated. Like, and I'm not saying metal, but it was like really massive drum sounds, like absolutely enormous, especially the toms. I always remember as a kid, it was like,
yeah.
I don't know who was doing front of house in the mid 80s, but absolutely insanely powerful. Some of the, I mean, it's all audio nerds. I think everything around Rush sort of implies that, isn't it? There's,
Yeah.
they're a nerdy band. They're guys and girls like us that love recording, love Rush, because you can hear all of the incredible layers. Like, I didn't know until Jamie broke down the guitar part, and I didn't know you and I were talking about this, that all of those intricate kind of chords, I just thought it was root fifths.
Alex Lifeson's famous for his big weird chords that fill the room.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right, so back to the drums. So we got the kick, we got the snare top, snare bottom, and then we got the tom tracks. Now, before you mixed it, did you do any kind of isolation of this stuff? Because
I think that Cameron edited them on his side before he sent them. I can't remember now, but let me look at my Reaper project, which I have up. So the toms, I think I cut the beginnings out, and there was a section in the middle where there were just no toms. So I did a little bit of a blanket manual gate. You can see there where there are just silent sections where I just got rid. And then I think I was using a plug-in gate as well, but just to avoid any false triggering, knowing there were no toms in the early sections, I just cut them. Right.
Yeah, so for me, I typically would go into those toms and separate them out and not remove them, but like gain down things in between. There are obviously great plugins that we talk about all the time that do it. MX, was it DSP? I'm blanking on their name.
McDSP? That one?
No, it's AIX DSP makes something.
Yeah.
But I do find that manual always seems to work best for me. It's a little bit like de-essing. I will either manually pull down the S's and the T's, or I'll use the technique where you just isolate the frequency and use it to control volume of that area. Rather than trying to find the specific frequency that's ripping my head off, I'll just turn down the whole S. And it's, so I think in this instance, I'm going to want to go through Eventide's inventory of plugins and find some interesting stuff, because we should talk about Eventide, because for me, they are the most credible digital company that ever existed. And the great thing is like, even the other companies we work with, like, we've done videos with, like Waves and OK Multimedia and Mac DSP, all of us, everybody in this industry looks up to Eventide because of what they were doing in the mid-70s. The H910, and then, of course, the first H3000s. And, I mean, they have always been cutting edge. Jack Douglas told me stories of taking the 910 and putting a flange on the Aerosmith snare, so it kind of has this doo. And you can hear, once your ear tunes into that, you go and listen to Aerosmith and you'll hear all those 70s records, and it's got one of the first digital, effects units mixed into it. It's just awesome to know that they've been there making this stuff for decades. I love it. And they're also all lovely people. I did a video with them about 3 years ago, and one of the owners sent me the most lovely email thanking me for talking about their history and stuff, and it got me all kind of emotional, because I just thought, this is a guy, I'm nobody, this guy's a legend. It was really beautiful.
Absolutely. I love Eventide stuff as well. I mean, from David Bowie's Fame, with that iconic fame, that kind of thing. Yeah. Nobody else could do that.
Yep.
And then I'm a big fan of Steve Vai, the guitar player, and on his iconic album Passion and Warfare, there are actually a couple of songs where the credits are Steve Vai on guitar and Eventide on H3000, because the song would not have been possible without it.
Yeah, we just got to tip our hats to Eventide. We're waffling on about the song here, but which is we can do forever. But yeah, what an absolutely incredible company. I'm trying to remember the Rush show, because I was about 13 or 14. Somebody asked me, I think it was a Hammersmith Odeon. When I'm trying to remember the year, I think it was Hammersmith Odeon. It was definitely in London. So that might answer your question. There's somebody who asked. I saw a lot of shows at Hammersmith Odeon back in those. I saw Motorhead there, Hawkwind there. Numbers of times. I was a huge Hawkwind fan when I was a kid, which Lemmy got up and played with And I got Lemmy's autograph backstage afterwards. You know, I was like 13, 14, standing around backstage with my Hawkwind program, and I had Lemmy sign it. So I have so many memories of Hammersmith Odeon. I don't think it's called that anymore, is it? Isn't it called something like Labatt's or something named after a beer or something, like everything?
I don't know.
All right, so look, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to group the drums here for everybody. So let's just group the drums. I'm just going to call it drums all. I'm going to avoid at all costs using any samples, and I'm going to solo it. But before, I don't have the rough mix in here, or the original mix, Eric. But I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to do it from from audience perspective, not drummers. Which way did you mix it?
I mixed it from drummer's perspective, which is different from the original, which was audience perspective.
Yes, I love that. I love because there's always this argument from drummers about doing it. So Neil Peart, who was a co-writer of all of these songs, wrote all the lyrics, actually mixed from audience perspective.
Now, funnily enough, again, being a massive Rush fan, I think this album's the exception. I think it was almost always drummer's perspective, but they were the kind of guys who would screw around and go, "Hey, let's try something different this time," which is annoying. I mean, if you read articles about what microphones they were using and that kind of thing, apparently on every song on this album, they changed everything, just different mics, different everything. So it's an absolute miracle that the album sounds consistent, and that's Paul Northfield for you. Incredible engineer. I believe it was him that engineered this album.
I don't know.
But yeah, different kick drum mics, different snare drum mics, all that kind of stuff on every different track. And somehow
love it.
It sounds similar enough because it's the same band and the mix engineer's like, "Oh, I hate you, but I'll EQ this differently."
I love that though. But isn't that, I mean, God, we could go on a massive tangent. We should just do things where we talk about this stuff. John says it's Labatt's Apollo, so I was right. It was the death of Roth music. You know, everybody talks about Spotify, which is more modern, or they talk about Napster or digital and all this stuff. I'm telling you, the death of rock music was the records that were made in the late 90s and the early 2000s, because it all started to become conveyor belt rock music. And you set up drums, you tune everything up, you track all the drums in like 4 or 5 days. Then they would go to the room next door where the guy would be editing everything perfectly, putting in the samples. It'd come back in, they'd do all the bass in 3 days, and then they would have guitars, they'd do all the rhythms, like this pair of amps on every single track, and then you ended up with this generic, horrible, horrific sounding albums of the late 90s and early 2000s. That's what killed rock music. Just everything being tuned and timed, and the worst thing is now that every 15-year-old kid who has a DAW can make a record that sounds like 1999.
Absolutely. But
they can't make a record. Nobody can make a record like this except incredible musicians. Incredible musicians getting together in a room and like fixing things, going, I'm a little bit behind here, let's just punch in, rather than nudging everything perfectly. It's a masterpiece. I mean, anyway, I'm quite passionate about that. And don't get me wrong, I like all genres of music, but I feel like it's one of those things that we cannot overstate just how incredible Rush were as musicians and how they were able to blend their musicality with great songwriting.
One last thing before you hit play and everybody hears it. Sorry, everybody. I know we're kind of stalling before we hear it. People have been asking about the tempo map, and I think that's very relevant to what you just said about kind of late 90s stuff. So the original song was not done with a metronome at all. It was literally just Neil Peart is a machine. This was tracked to a metronome just so we could be tight, 175 BPM, but nothing has been edited, locked in, no drum locking in or anything. This is all just natural. This is us off the floor, so to speak.
Amazing. Well, I love that too. Absolutely love that too. So what I'm going to do is I've got all the drums soloed here. And tom-wise, now because I've got the producer you here, how were your toms? So tom 1 is presumably, I see, goes from highest to lowest. I mean,
yes. His floor 2 was actually panned to the left because it was on his left side.
Are you talking about Cameron or are you talking about Neil?
Cameron. Sorry. So Cameron's setup was, if you're thinking from drummer's perspective, from left to right, it went lowest, highest, middle, low.
And does it so okay, so floor 2.
That's how I panned it.
So how do you pan it? Tell me where you want me to pan it.
So are we doing drummer perspective or audience?
I don't mind. If you want to do drummer perspective, we can do that.
From drummer perspective, I did Tom 1 was about 50% left.
50% left. Okay, we're doing that now.
Yeah. Tom 2 was 30% right. Floor 1 was 70% right, and floor 2 was 70% left.
Oh wow!
Which sounds like a lot, but when he's doing these big, crazy kind of fills, suddenly that makes sense. I know it's quite extreme, but it makes those big, crazy tom fills pop.
Well, let's listen, everybody. Where am I monitoring from? This sounds mono. This doesn't sound stereo, Eric.
It's coming through for me in stereo. Anybody else?
You're hearing it in stereo?
I am. I'm using the thing that nobody else can hear. So
that might just be
me that's hearing it in mono.
Unfortunately, it could be this extension headphone cable.
Well, as long as everybody else is hearing it in stereo.
Yeah, I hear it on YouTube in stereo.
Some people are saying no sound. Is it no sound, or is it just not very loud?
It's very quiet.
Because this is something that they are quite low looking at them.
Yeah.
So the way that I was working was kind of...
I'm going to boost these.
Yes, I think I boosted them quite a lot as well, because
Yeah.
what Cameron sent me wasn't particularly high output on the toms.
Yeah. So what I'm doing, everybody, those of you that, depending on what DAW is, I'm using clip gain, and I'm going to bring these up quite considerably. So this is all part of our prep. Let's prep the prep. Oh, by the way, if you haven't already, please download the multitracks, and the link is underneath. All right, this is probably going to be very loud now, so be prepared.
Yes, rock and roll.
You won't be hearing the music through the mics because we're wearing headphones. Okay, so, all right, now we have audible toms. Okay, and we have the panning per the producer. So did you go in and clean up in between here as well?
No, because my mentality with this mix was I wanted to do it as closely, as faithfully to 1981 as possible. So I did use gates like hardware gates because they give that thing. I know you were saying that you do the kind of manuals thing, and I usually do. But in this case, I was trying to kind of chase the early 80s, late 70s thing. And of course, unless you're an absolute wizard, you can't really do that with the tape. So that was my outlook.
Great. Fantastic. All right. I am going to listen to the kick near. I'm just going to go through and listen to some stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do now that I've got these two snares together is just have a listen to the phase and also, frankly, look at it. So the first thing for me is the phase is a little wonky. What was your experience on this?
I think I checked the phase and the polarity was correct.
Right.
And from there, I just kind of went with it. Again, thinking analog tape style, like they would have to have used something like an Eventide, something to push the delay by a couple of milliseconds or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have at the time, but if we can do that now, that's incredible.
Cool. So everybody's saying they can't download the multitracks. So I assume you and Lee are sorting that out, pretty please.
Yeah.
With with bells on top. That would be really lovely. Nothing like testing beforehand, and this was nothing like testing beforehand. Oh, I like the little shout there. So with the bottom snare in, I'm losing a little bit of lows, like a little bit. You can probably, hopefully everybody can hear that. So it's a tough one with the phase because it really depends. What sometimes happens when you get top and bottom mics is if the bottom and the top heads are tuned very differently, if they're tuned differently, then what will happen is you won't get... you won't be able to get perfect phase. It just won't. And I think that's what's going on here. To me, typically, that first hit should be going the same direction. So if the phase or the polarity, I suppose, was correct, then I would expect actually to see the top mic, identical to the bottom. What I'm going to do here is grab the overheads, which I am also going to gain up. I assume you did that as well, yes?
Yes, I did. So the way that I did it wasn't with clip gain. The way I did it was with when I got to the mix stage, whatever saturation I was using, I would hit the input. Same idea.
Yep.
Different method.
Yeah, different method. We're in different DAWs, so different ways of doing it. So now I'm going to listen to the snare with the overheads. Now, as Adam's pointing out, there was less tools available in those days to correct phase. We didn't have Little Labs, which has that incredible thing where you can just subtly adjust it, which is just beautiful. I'm blanking on what Little Labs tool's called, but it's amazing. I'm sure somebody here remembers it, and that's incredible. And that's hardware.
The Red Eye 3D Phantom thing, that one.
It's not called that. But
oh, I know what you mean. The
yeah,
other
but
one,
it's
the Little Labs
fantastic.
phase thing.
Yeah, and it's really good on bass guitars, and you can you can adjust it in real time when you're tracking and get that beautiful kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, they had, Nita's asking, they did have phase reversal, polarity switching, all that stuff, but, they couldn't subtly adjust it. They could time shift stuff if they were using digital delays, but even that is pretty minimal. It's interesting, a lot of the times they would just do things like, especially on bass guitars, where they would just wipe off the low end of one thing and use the low end of the other, which is frankly what I do now. It looks like the link is working now, everybody. So please, if you haven't already, download the multitracks. That would be amazing.
I've just looked again at my Reaper project for this, and you are absolutely right on the phase of the snare bottom. There's a little button for the polarity that I seem to have ticked. So you were absolutely spot on.
So it's an interesting one because, the way I look at it is like obviously on the big peaks and troughs. It's like here you see, my gut is I would delay the top snare by that length. If I go to samples, it's 21 samples. So I will just go to delays here and time adjuster and just put 21 samples in on the snare top like so. So now it's delayed, and then I will take the bottom one and flip it and see if that helps. So I'll just get a trim. This is a little bit of an experiment. It always is, because nothing is perfect. It just, all I do is just listen for, is there more low end coming back in? And if there is, then we've succeeded.
Oh, there it is.
It's subtle. To be honest, one could argue that we're not going to solve this properly. Because, as like I said, it seems like that if you listen to the bottom head, now listen to the top, they are slightly different tuned, which is okay, but they're giving us a different kind of feel between the two. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just be realistic about this. I'll use the time adjuster just to drag it back a little bit, but I don't even know if that's really helping us, because if I pull this back, it's knocking these parts out of phase. But then this area here, which you could argue should be flipped, is completely wrong. And so yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. I'm going to probably, honestly, everybody, use EQ. So what I might decide to do is go, okay, the high end, more of the high end can come from the snare bottom and more of the body can come from the snare top. And I think that will solve the problem. So these are the sort of things when I'm going to mixing, I'm intellectualizing. I would have done this 25 minutes ago, but we're talking about it, Yeah. But these are the things before I even start to mix. I start looking at phase. I start looking at the clip, the volume, clip gain in Pro Tools, but, the volume of individual tracks and the panning, and then getting a rough blend up. So, all right, we got the toms done. So we're going to pan the hi-hat. What did you do? 60%? To the left.
Let's have a look. That sounds about right. Almost exactly. Yeah.
Great. So now I've got 60%. I'm also going to turn that hi-hat up so it's a more audible. What I'll do is I'll listen to kick, snare, hi-hat and just see if that feels like on that intro, the famous groove that he plays. Let's have a listen. Lisa, are you asking about the snare top and snare bottom? It's because the snare top and snare bottom aren't tuned exactly, which is fine, that you don't get an exact kind of phase. You can't cancel them out exactly. Plus, of course, there's bleed and all kinds of other things. But yeah, typically when you front and back mic a guitar cab or top and bottom mic a tom, you can get 75% of the way there by just reversing the polarity of the bottom mic. So it's seeing the waveforms going in the same direction, but it will never be perfect. It can't be. It would have to be equal distance away, wouldn't it? It would have to be, you'd have to have a drum head here and then it'd be exactly. So there's always compromises in everything we do. But in some ways, I like that because that imperfection makes stuff feel real. Now, how much ride playing is there on here? Because I see a ride mic, which is super low.
There is quite a fair bit. After the verse, the pre-chorus and things like that, there are some quite significant ride sections.
Okay, and what did you do? 60% to drummer's
roughly,
perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go and do 60% drummer's perspective. Okay.
Yeah. So I kept that one quite low, but then when if it wasn't coming through on the overheads, then I just brought the ride up until it sat.
Why should you download the multitrack? So you can mix it? But if you're not a mixer,
you don't have to.
Don't have to. if you don't want to mix it, then don't download
for you to have fun with and experiment, see what we do your own thing.
What a strange question. You don't have to download them. It's okay. There's no
Eric's download the multi-tracks or else.
Yeah, Eric's not coming over to your house to force you to download them. It's okay. Okay, so the China, where did you pan that?
I had that 100% right because it's really far off to the side.
Okay.
So this is just a supporting mic. It's not very loud at all, but when he absolutely smacked it, I mean, it might have actually been to the point where it was just inaudible in the mix, honestly. Because the overheads...
Oh, there it is.
There you go. Yeah. The overheads took care of a lot of that.
Doc Jazz is making a joke. I wouldn't make that joke. He probably thinks... No, you don't have to download them. One of the things that we love doing is giving people the opportunity, when we do a lot of when we test stuff out, we will do we'll actually record all the stuff so you can hear if you like the mic. When we did the Lewitt mic recently, we did 9 different settings on the microphone so you could hear the differences between all of them. It does take like 3 days to film a video, and there's absolutely no way you could ever make $1 from doing it, but that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to educate.
Science.
All right, so the room mic. So I'm going to give us a listen. I'm going to crank the schnizzle out of it, actually quite heavily. John, we're doing it, which is unusual for me, John, but we're doing it drummer's perspective because that's what Adam did, so you can compare the mixes. But normally I always do it audience perspective because I'm a terrible drummer, so I would never, I'd never think like a drummer. Yes, JC, this video is going to be online forever. The room mics are pretty good, you know, for his own personal room.
Yeah,
quite happy with
one
them.
thing about the original mix is there wasn't much of a room mic in there. I don't think it was a very dry mix.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of late 70s, early 80s. It took a little bit of time for that to come in.
Yeah, it was that cusp between the late 70s drummer in the tiniest box you can find, you know what I mean, the super dead sound, and the mid 80s reverb on everything.
Yeah,
this was very much in between, which is weird.
Which is unusual because the reverb and everything was all really Hugh and Steve Lillywhite's fault because, you know, of course, them doing... Phil Collins was the most famous exponent of it, of course, but it originated with Phil Collins, but Phil Collins playing drums on Peter Gabriel's Melt album on that solo record.
What year was that?
80? 80.
Right, so it was roughly the same, 79, 80, yeah, same time.
So, and then, of course, you know, In the Air Tonight came out a year later, employing the techniques that Phil was using on Peter Gabriel record. But of course, you know, as we all know, that was a total accident. Hugh leaned into the talkback, pressed the button, and could hear the mic bleed coming through of the mic they'd hung from the ceiling just so they could hear Phil talk. And they used a cheap microphone up there, and, you know, just one that was spare that nobody ever used, and the rest is history. You know, Hugh had the the tech come in after the session and have that talkback mic printed through a channel so he could manipulate it and gate it and give us that famous effect. But then, unfortunately, the organic naturalness that Hugh and Steve and Phil Collins came up with on the Peter Gabriel record suddenly became just an excuse to use a Lexicon reverb with a gate, which is unfortunate. So it went from being organic and real to suddenly being... So they can't take full responsibility for ruining drum sounds.
But yeah, the original of this song was released the same year as that original Peter Gabriel Melt.
Oh, wow.
So it was very much contemporary, but I think that Rush hadn't yet decided to embrace that thing. Yep,
I hear. All right, so I'm going to now play everything and see if I'm going to do a rough mix balance of the drums as they play. So what I'm doing is we've done the panning, so now you're just going to hear me kind of get a rough mix together. First thing I'm doing is bringing down the room mics. Bring up the kick. Now, the first thing for me is that you hear the kick when the overheads are too heavily favoured and the room's too heavily favoured. You can get a flamming going on. Now, again, you could use time adjuster and you could actually knock the kick drum back into those mics, but I'm not. I'm just going to bring down those elements that are causing it because ultimately it's rock music and you do want to emphasize your kick and snare. You want it to be connected. We want these elements to feel like they're all connected, but at the same time, we don't want it. We don't want to lose sight of the fact that what's going to drive this is that kick and snare and hat. So here I am, turning up the kick quite a lot. So I'm just going to cheat and I'm going to go in there and gain up the kick. So, so it's a bit more comparable. Just favouring the top mic. Did you do that? Favouring the top mic over the bottom snare?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Got the overhead sound. I mean, to me, this is like a good rough mix, a good start. So I'm going to keep going like this before we get into any plugins. Sorry, Eventide. We will be using your plugins soon, but the whole purpose is obviously to teach mixing here. Is it? It looks like in my rooms, in my drums all group, I didn't put the room in there. So what we're going to do quickly is go to drums all and add the room mic. And then what I'll typically do is group anything that needs to be grouped. So I'm going to create a quick snare group here and a tom group. And that's probably all I need to do. But it means that if I want to just quickly solo those elements, I don't have to kind of go in there and individually do it. I'm sure in Reaper you have all the same tools.
Yeah, very much so. Slightly different method, same outcome.
Okay, so now let's go and listen to the bass. I hope you've got plenty of time, Adam, because this is going to be a long session.
I've got all night.
Okay, good.
And someone was asking what I'm drinking, and this is to help me get through. I'm drinking an old-fashioned cocktail.
Uh-oh. So in about an hour's time, this guy's going to be sounds great.
Only the one.
That sounds great. Awesome. Hey, Karen. Where were these drums recorded, says Karen? It's in Cameron's studio in Canada. Where does he live?
Yeah, in Toronto, in Canada, yeah. So
Nice.
One of the reasons I asked Cameron specifically is he's a true Canadian and, of course, is a massive Rush fan. It made perfect sense.
What? Canadians like Rush? I never realized. When I went to Canada the first time, it was just, and this we're talking late 90s, it was all Rush and Tragically Hip.
Yes.
There was always the hippie. Hey, I'm going to see the hippie. I was like, what's a band? The hippie? I don't know them.
I would have loved to have seen the Hip.
Yeah, unfortunately one of them died a couple of years ago, didn't they? It was very sad. But when I worked with Don Smith, God rest his soul as well, incredible engineer and producer, I went into his studio and he had like 3 or 4 albums that he had done with them. And I knew them and he was impressed. He's like, wow, an English person knows the Tragically Hip. I was like, I got Canadian friends. I had this Canadian girlfriend and she moved to LA, and I remember she said to me, total sidebar, nothing to do with music. She said to me, she goes, if you ever hear me say, "Hey, will you let me know, eh?" All right. Anyway. Wow. You're smacking the schnizzle out of those.
I am massive Geddy Lee fan. That is what he does, and as a result, that's what I do. That DI is an Avalon U5 from a jazz bass, so it's a single coil going into a very transparent DI, so every last transient is hitting you right in the face.
Wow. Well, Lisa says Detroit girls like Rush too.
Nice.
Now that's a bass tone, baby.
Oh yeah. So that is again that's quite a faithful Geddy Lee bass tone. It's the Sans amps, if you know those, the pedals.
Yeah.
So in his modern sound, he uses 2 of those with slightly different sounds. And so that's what I've got there. And that is because he used to apparently originally have a bass amp that was kind of clean and a Marshall guitar amp and blend those together with the DI. So now he uses the Sans amps, which do a very similar thing. But because you've got the DI and the Sans amps separately there, you can blend them to taste, and it should give you a very similar result to the old Geddy Lee sound.
Wow. Well, Al Acoustic says it's all about the bass.
Ah, yes.
So let's have a look at the phase here. Now, that to me is almost exactly out of phase. So I'm going to take this delay here of the DI, which is 124 samples. So we'll go and grab in Pro Tools. I'm not sure what DAW you do. Time adjuster, you can use a delay. And I'm putting it back 124 samples, and I am flipping the polarity. So I'm flipping the polarity of the top and dragging it back. Let's see what the difference is. Without. Huge difference.
Massive difference.
All the low end came back. So again, I know we haven't got into any Eventide plugins. Sorry, Eventide, but we will soon.
We will.
This is how we prep a mix. And like I said, I hadn't even listened to these multi-tracks before we started. And I just wanted to share the whole experience of what I do every time we start a mix. So, yeah, it's so much fun having you on here, Adam, because I just feel like otherwise I'm talking into an empty space. Like, and here I am.
I know exactly what you mean.
I'm going to solo the snare. All right. So you can see how huge it is to get phase and polarity right. I believe it was Bruce Swidian and quite a few other, definitely him. I think it was Jeff Emmerich, definitely John Leckie, definitely Dave Jordan. I'm thinking of all the producers and engineers I've spoken to, and no, all of them at one point have said the words, good recording and mixing is all about proper phase and polarity. So.
So just to answer a question in chat about the bass tone again, around this time, Geddy Lee was known for using a Rickenbacker bass. But at this time, he'd started using a Fender jazz bass. And he definitely has gone on record in interviews to say, this song, jazz bass. And so that's what I used in this song. Because I had the choice. Luckily, my dad is a big Rush fan as well and has the Rickenbacker. I was going to borrow it. But then did my research, found nope, it's the jazz bass. That's what I play. Happy days.
Wow.
And you compare this to the original sound, and I've got a little bit more low end going on here than they had at the time, but otherwise they're pretty much there.
What's interesting, Doc Jazz, that's very kind of you. The what is, I suppose, what's interesting about this? Well, you know what? I'm not going to go on a tangent here. To me. Oh, I was gonna. So a lot of people said that you were playing chords that Geddy didn't play.
I think that's right. I may have accidentally done that. I think he either played them live at some point or later on in the song or something. And I subconsciously, on that particular take, played some bass chords at the start, which, fair enough, they're not quite historically accurate. I'll give you that. But I know it's something that Geddy does a lot, so I think it kind of made sense. Yeah,
there's always that argument because I've done reviews of songs where we've broken the songs down and we've got people to come in and guest, and people will say, well, the Thin Lizzy one was the big one. We did a really great episode with Jamie on Thin Lizzy, and we took a long time breaking down the harmonies. And Jamie figured it out and nailed it from the original recordings. But then people were saying, well, I saw them live and they didn't play it like that. And Jamie's like, there's 7 parts here. And there's 2 guitar players on stage. Of course they didn't play it like that, you know. And this is quite often what happens is like all of us, myself included, we blur the experience of seeing a band live together and then the record and realize that, you know, rock bands, once they discover 24 tracks worth of takes, they could start overdubbing and bouncing stuff together. You know, that's hard to reproduce live. So you sometimes either have to play one of the parts or probably more likely combine all of the ideas together in one take. And when they're going on pre-recorded stuff, pre-digital playback, Geddy's probably live playing those big chords to fill it in. Because he's got a bass pedal, he's maybe reaching over to a synth, and he's playing bass itself and singing. I mean, there's only so much one human being can do. He's pretty amazing, but you know, he's still one guy.
Absolutely. And that all that said, there is only one guitarist in the band, so live, you've got to fill the space somehow.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's check out Jamie's rhythm playing.
Oh, you gotta like this.
Then Lisa says, or C note, 2 guitars arranged for 1 in a guitar tab sheet music. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I mean, just playing it like that, you can hear things that we need to do. The toms need some 300-400 pulled out of it. They're a little cowboardy. About to say cowboardy. Cowboy.
Yeah.
But that's pretty typical. Just whacking the solo.
A couple of people are asking about the guitar tone, because that is just as Jamie sent it. But it's not nearly as complicated setup-wise as it sounds. It's double-tracked hard left and hard right. So he sent over a stereo track, and we did a bit of digging to find out what amp he was using. It was a Huart. It was a Huart 103, pretty much on 10, and a chorus pedal in front of it, and that's it.
That makes sense. I mean, that was pretty cutting edge back in like 79, 80. People just stuck. I mean, a chorus pedal was a big departure from the rock before that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it. And so we were trying to find the exact chorus pedal that he used. We couldn't find the exact model, but this was actually done in the Line 6 Helix. And so there was a chorus called 70s Chorus. And we put that on because I was on a call with Jamie as he did it. And we looked at each other and went, that's it. That's the sound. And that's it. Nothing more.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to throw in the guitar solo for Schnizzle. You know, my friend Tim Pierce did a video 2 days ago, which was really kind of him, and he talked about the video I did with Graham, my friend Graham Coxon from Blur. We talked about song number 2, and he called the video Reckless Abandon, and he talked about one of the big things that is lacking in a lot of guitar playing stuff is that, and goodness, there is no lack of reckless abandon in that guitar solo. I love how he just goes for it. That's another thing I love about Robert Fripp. You know, he can do all these layers and all this crazy, intricate stuff, but then also some of his solos are just like, you know, the stuff he did on you know, like Ashes to Fashion. You know, and it's just like, that's what rock and roll has. You know, and the fact, again, it's another thing we can throw back to why Rush was so good, or are so good, you know, despite them not playing anymore, they still exist, and there's still the music out there, is the fact that they combine all those things. They had the amazing musicianship and production, but they also wrote amazing songs, and they also had a rock and roll aesthetic, a kind of middle fingerness, I always like to call it, you know, just still kind of an anti-establishment, even though they're kind of like probably seen by the punk rock people at the time as being very kind of like safe. They weren't. They were not at all. Tell us a bit about this bass synth. What was the original bass synth on here?
So the bass synth was an Oberheim. I think it was an OBX. It was one of the OB series. And apparently you set the dials a certain way, you press the button and you get this and you go, I have a song.
Wow. Let's have a quick listen. So what did you use to get that sound? Because it sounds pretty darn close.
So I used the Arturia OBXA, which is a faithful recreation of that series of synths. Right. And the synth itself has, I think, 8 different voices in, so you just stereo pan them. So when you press one button, it does that. And there's nothing else on there. That is it.
Wow.
The synth just does that. It's the same synth that does like the Jump by Van Halen, that sound. You know, that big, massive room filling. Oh my word.
I thought Jump was on a Jupiter 8. Was it on Jupiter 8?
I thought that, but apparently it's an OBX. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
I mean, you might be right. I know people very close that can. As you know, Eddie gave me a guitar and actually gave me one of his amps. He's no longer with us. God rest his incredible soul. But I'm sure I can find out and get a proper confirmation. Okay. And then, of course, the synth lead parts. Let's have a listen. Gonna crank them.
Right, so these two, the lead, I'm told the original was a Moog Model D, but I used a different patch on that Arturia OBXA, and I think it sounds really like the original. And the top line is a string machine, kind of like on Cars, that kind of typical top line wobbling string, but not really a string kind of thing. So I used an ARP Selena for that top line because that's, the classic string machine. And
nice.
Quite often in this song, it's not very loud, but it's there and it just supports everything.
Right. Amazing. All right. I haven't got to the vocal yet. I'm going to go past it. I'm going to listen to the drum plate. So what did you print with the drum plate?
Oh, so these two, the plates, are just the reverbs that I used. In case you want them, if you want to scrap them, start again, feel free. So the drum plate was a Lexicon 480 on the snare plate with quite a big low cut beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
I think that for this album, that Lexicon sound is quite integral to the drum sound. Although now that I've done my research a little more, I think it would have been a Lexicon 224 rather than a 480 because I don't think the 480 was out yet.
No,
but it was that Lexicon thing.
Yeah, totally. Oh God, when I first started in music, that was the catchphrase. When I first started, we were all buying Alesis, which I still think are an incredible company. Sorry, the quad reverb I still have. There's one setting we love on that. I have microverbs. I love that company. They did affordable digital sounding stuff, and they're absolutely amazing. But we all wanted to go to a real studio and use a Lexicon. It was the thing.
Warrior, me means try. Today's Tom Sawyer, me pride.
Cool. So that's Adam singing. Adam, tell us about the vocal recording. What did you use?
So the vocal was, if you've seen the video that we did for that, it was live. It was off the floor. It was the Lewitt 940.
Great.
Because at the time, the 1040 hadn't come out yet, so I didn't have it. So I was using the best Lewitt mic I had. So yeah, I actually played the bass and the keys and the synths and sang live on the cameras, which was difficult. But yeah, you'll hear a little bit of bass bleed because you'll hear the clacking of the strings. I did use in-ears, so there was very little bleed from anything else, thankfully. But yeah, it's just that straight into a Drama 1960 preamp, which is a Valve preamp, one of my favorites.
Wow.
And nothing else. A little bit of Melodyne that I might have done before I printed it, maybe. Let's not talk about that.
Are you saying you may have edited yourself at some point?
Maybe. I mean, it didn't need heavy editing, but there were a couple of bits where I was listening to it, especially the high notes, and going, let's just tweak that a little.
Well, Sheila was saying she had a Alesis SR16. I did have an SR16. The demo we did for what's it called? The Goo Goo Dolls Iris. We did an Iris demo that was done on an SR16. But
nice.
but when I was in bands, we actually had an HR-16. Remember those? The big, ugly, grey ones are about this size. And the problem is the keys used to kind of stick and break really easily, the little... And when the SR-16 came out, they had solved that. So all of the not the keys, the pads, I suppose is the best way to describe it. They were a lot more resilient, the SR-16 pads. The HR-16's ones didn't have a give to them. They were kind of like on-off, like buttons. But there is something remarkable. And as Sheila said, SR-16, of course, I did like the old fool I am, reminisce and start and look up HR-16 and see that you can buy them used for $349. And I'm thinking, should I get myself an SR-16? Which is probably going to be impossible to repair once it breaks down, but... It doesn't look like they've held their value very well. I mean, a lot of vintage digital stuff now is considered to be... I mean, the thing is, there wasn't really any velocity on it that was worth anything, but they do look super cool.
I suppose it also depends on how many was made. Lindrums are going for a pretty penny because there weren't that many of them.
And they were used on so many great records.
Yeah, it's true.
So people associate it with it. But my guess is that, if you have a Lindrum, you just sample the whole thing and then you've got a Lindrum. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but, ereverb.com, HR-16, the great forgotten drum machine. It was pretty amazing, but the SR, of course, came out and blew it away, was cheaper, easy to use, didn't break down. TT says, I have an HR-16 too, and he has an Ensoniq EPS and a Mac Plus with Master Tracks Pro and an opcode MIDI interface. Wow!
Nice.
My friend Paul was one of the inventors of opcode.
Wow.
Yeah, who now works with Focal. He was one of the inventors of opcode.
A modern day warrior, means dry. Today's Tom Sawyer, pride.
I will say that's not a mix, but just as a rough and just going there, phase correcting instruments, gaining them up and panning them around and getting rough levels, it sounds pretty darn good. And that's when you talk about the original recordings, were done. They were done to be brought up on fader. I remember asking Joe Ciccarelli about that. When he was working with Zappa, he goes, "You had pride in those days. You wanted the next engineer who was maybe doing a vocal overdub on your song that you'd worked on to just be zeroed out on the faders and panned in position and sound absolutely amazing. That's what you wanted." And
Absolutely.
I think that we forget that. Now I get sent stuff, we all do, and you're just like sifting through it for hours trying to make it make sense. But this is coming up really, really well. So the question is, did you model yourself on Geddy as a singer?
Massively. Huge Geddy Lee fan. If I shave this beard off now, I've got the long hair, I've got the soul patch. I always wanted to be Geddy from being like 4 years old. I kid you not. Like, that's why when I grew up and everyone's like, I want to be a guitarist, I was like, I want to be a bass player. And everyone looks at me and goes, really? No, really? Yeah.
Amazing. So, I want to just give it a little bit of a listen, and then we'll start making EQ, compression, etc. discussions.
A modern day warrior, means dry. Today's Tom Sawyer, pride. Reserve a quiet defense, writing out the day's events. The river.
Cool. We back on? Yeah, cool. So my gut is I'm just going to go through and do the really obvious things and do it from there. So the obvious things to me are the toms, first of all. So the first thing I'm going to do is look, and like I said to you guys and girls, I'm coming in this completely cold. We've just leveled this up. I wanted this to be an experience of what it's like to mix from scratch. So I'm going to take my drum group off, but I've got my tom group on, and we'll just make that larger. So the first thing I'm going to start doing is, well, I'm going to go into individual toms. Let's have a listen to them collectively. Oh, Brian Parks wants to know where you're from, Adam.
Originally from Manchester, England. I've moved all around the north, but my accent is not Mancunian, so to speak. It's more general northern, more Game of Thrones.
What is Manchester? I mean, is it more? It's kind of like talking through the teeth, isn't it? Like
yeah, right, kid.
Kid, yeah. It's what isn't Arcade? Isn't that Liverpool? Liverpool Arcade.
I think it's both.
Well, I used to live in
Liverpool. It's right, La.
Oh, yeah. Well, because things have changed, because the Beatle accent from Liverpool doesn't exist anymore. Nobody says Liverpool. Nobody talks like that anymore. Liverpool. You just don't hear that anymore. Accents have changed so dramatically. So your Game of Thrones, that explains your Viking look with the hair and the beard. So basically, Adam is Game of Thrones. That's the answer you were looking for, Brian.
Where's he from? North of the Wall. Yes.
Where's he from? Game of Thrones. Okay, so let's go have a look. So, Eventide. Here we go. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Now we all know collectively. We talked about Eventide at the beginning as being this incredible digital company that's been making digital hardware longer than anybody else. So I do want to have some fun with some of the really fun things. For instance, the Omnipressor, I think, is probably one of the best pieces of hardware and software ever invented, and we're going to have some fun with that. But in this instance, and of course, the split EQ is just genius.
I love the split EQ. It's so good.
Maybe your vocal sounds well recorded, though. Typically, I'd put that on the vocal and it would work stuff, but I don't think we're going to need it, but we might go to it. But the Insta-flanger, oh my God, that's so amazing. All right, but I'm just going to go generic EQ. So where are we going to get some generics? There's the EQ45. Let's see what we got here. Wow. That reminds me of the Yuri 546 I used to have. Now, I'm sure it's not, because it's the original EQ45. But what I'm saying is it reminds me of the 70s. I love it. So this is perfect for something that was recorded at the tail end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. So I'm just going to just take this tom fill. So this is going to drive everybody nuts, because for a second you're going to hear it go over and over and over again. But sorry, that's what I'm going to do. So I've got a low cut. Because it's a higher tom, I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to exaggerate and sweep through so you can hear my selection process. Adam's doing the tom part. So everybody hearing here, I'm not sure if you've got headphones on, you're in a room with a good low end. You can hear that around about 80 is like the earliest that you really hear the boom in the tom. Typically, I will go on smaller toms, sort of the 80 to 100 area. However, as I'm sure you're all aware, if you've watched anything we do, that is really where the fundamental on a bass guitar lays. So we have to be careful. If there's a lot of toms playing all the time, like a lot, if you've got a floor tom just pummeling through, you're going to have to get judicious. You don't want to be just taking 60 to 80 to 100 hertz and just boosting that like crazy, because you're going to kill the low end on your bass guitar. So this is kind of a 6 of one, half dozen the other. There's sections like this where there is a ton of toms playing. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look down and listen to what the bass is doing. So let's throw in the bass. So what are we hearing? We're hearing something really beautiful, and I would not be surprised if these smart people that made this record, between the producer, the engineer, and the band, realized, look, if I want to hear these low end of these toms, why don't we just hold out a bass note? It's genius. They've done us the big favor of that. So it actually means that I'm going to boost a little bit lower on these toms, than maybe I would if there was a really fast driving bass line going through there, because I feel like them ducking a little bit of the low end out of the bass is not going to matter, which is rather beautiful. So we've high passed up to 80 on the high tom. I'll go back to that area there. Solo it. Now we're going to select what we want to boost. I think it's going to be 90 to 100. Let's have a look. Now, there's a sort of resonant frequency that's happening about 130. So I want... quite often I'll go below the frequency that is the fundamental and boost, so it doesn't sound too EQ'd. I'm sure, Adam, you know what I mean. If you go in and you find like a fundamental and boost it, that can be really good. It'll also be absolutely horrific because you suddenly get the resonant kind of like fundamental. So I learned this from Jack Douglas years ago. Like, he'll go to a snare and boost 60 on a Pultec, which makes no sense. There's no 60 hertz in the snare. If there is, it's going to bring up the kick bleed. But he does that because he wants a gentle slope, grabbing the 150, 200 and bringing it up beautifully in a slope, rather than going into 150 and 200 and going beep, boosting like this. It's a huge thing I learned from smart people.
Yeah, as we know on Pultecs, the number on the device means nothing. It's just a big, wide, nice thing.
So there you go. I went to where I was saying about 90 or 100. Boosted 100 pretty aggressively. I mean... and it's going below that fundamental, but it's giving us a nice curve. So you don't always need to EQ the exact area you want. And if with a choice of high passing and boosting, I've created this nice slope in there, as opposed to just going door at 130. It's a little bit like I talked about multiple times now about sweeping. If you go in and try to find offensive frequencies by boosting them, you'll end up bringing out about 37 frequencies, because any frequency pretty much ever boosted by 12 dB is going to suck. You know, it doesn't matter where it is. You're looking for problems. Here, we're going to catch some of that fundamental, but we're warming it up. All right, let's go and search for some cut area. And at the moment, I haven't adjusted the width. Wow, massive difference. So you see that I've got about 350. I actually widened the, I don't know if you can see the highlight. Does that work for you? You can? Okay, great.
Yes.
Great. So I've actually widened the width a little bit. So I've got a nice big cut. Now I can play that game between the boost of the low and the cut and create like a nice like kind of shelving like this. I love not being able to see it and using our ears. So this is an analog EQ emulated, and we can discuss whether people do or don't like it. But what I like about this is I'm not making EQ decisions based on what I'm seeing. I'm making EQ decisions based on what I'm hearing. I mean, it already sounds like a really good tom to me.
Less of the bongo.
Yeah. I mean, listen to the low mid cut and listen to the boost, and it's just great. And the reality is now, I'm probably just going to quickly and simply and lazily copy this EQ down to Tom 2. And I'm going to start at that point, because I'm trying to mix a song. And even though we're discussing and breaking down, you know, I'd only be 15 minutes into this if we weren't talking about all the stuff and having fun.
I've just checked my mix, and that's exactly what I did.
I'm sure it is, yeah. So I'm going to start at this point. Yeah. So all I'm going to do on this is do a little less boost, because there's already more resonant frequency going on this. I've opened up the low cut a little bit, or high pass, depending on how you want to say it. I do like low cut. I think a lot of people, when they're first starting out, if you're new to this, low cut makes so much more sense, doesn't it? Oh, please hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I'd like to. If this video does really well, we'll do more of these with Adam, because I'm like, this is a good thing to do. It's much easier for me because I get somebody else to waffle on and just not just me all the time.
Please, sir, hit the like button.
And go to Hot Pole Studios and like Adam. And subscribe. That was your public announcement for today.
Thank you.
All right. I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to go to floor 1. So, because I have the producer here, which one's the lowest one, floor 1 or floor 2?
Floor 2, I think, is the lowest one.
Okay.
We're about to find out.
About to find out. Here's floor 1.
Floor 2 was lower than that, I think.
Now, you could argue that split EQ could work well here to control just a little bit of excessive boom. It happens ever so slightly. Can everybody hear that? It just goes woo, woo. It just overtakes. Have a listen. But we're trying to preserve something here. We're trying to preserve performance. We're trying to preserve recording. This is why we're trying to do the less is more. By the way, I love this EQ. Okay, so I took the low cut or the high pass and brought it down to 60. I brought the boost down to 86. And now I'm going to copy that EQ to the Flom 2? Flom 2!
From the tom to the flom.
From the tom and floor became flom. That's the new terminology here, kids. It's floor tom is a flom. Just to let you know. So I copied the EQ down. It's bypass. Have a listen.
That one sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds nice. So I brought it down to about 80 to get a little bit more on that. Still kept the cut at 350. I'm not doing, you'll notice I'm not doing any high boost at the moment. I'm going to listen to this in context. I should be listening to this in context all the time. But what I'm saying is I'm listening to it in context because I don't know, if I start boosting some high end for some snap, I might be bringing up a lot of cymbal bleed.
I was going to say that. I had to fight that quite hard. And seeing as though we're looking at the Eventide stuff, I have a suggestion.
Please, suggest away.
So split EQ is really good for this, pushing that snap region on the transient only.
Yep.
Really good because it doesn't affect the cymbals.
Right.
Magic.
Well, when we get to that stage, which could be in about 7 days, we'll do that because I like that. I'm gonna go back into drums and now I'm gonna listen to the drums with the toms now EQ. Let's just see if they feel how much nicer they feel. Absolutely love it. Nice.
Yeah, just Karen is saying some ringing on the kick and the floor toms. It's not the kick mic. It is on all the toms. The toms have not been gated.
Yeah.
Or manually stripped, so we can actually hear a natural resonant kit. As happens with a real drum kit, they are sympathetic vibrations. It's a real pain in the backside.
Yeah, I've got to decide what we're going to do on that, but I'm not going to decide that at the moment. I'm going to wait until we got things in. But you're right, Karen. It's one of those things where I like to do these in stages. So I think what I'm going to do is just grab the same EQ for the kick, because as we know, this is triggered anyway. This is a triggered kick. So I don't really have to worry about bleed, and I can be a little bit more aggressive with it. So I'll go to the Eventide, I don't need the EQ 65. I just want to look at it. Ooh. Notch peak, fine frequency. This would be really good for, getting rid of like offensive fine like little things. I don't need it. I'm going to go generic. Generic's the wrong word, but I'm going to go and grab something. Just going to grab the EQ 45. Now don't laugh at me, but I'm going to do some low cut. Because
it makes perfect sense to me. A lot of really good kick drums actually have too much low end.
Yeah, so it's going to allow me...
Especially in the kind of sub-destroyer range where it doesn't actually help.
Well, the thing is like, if you go up to like 10 or 20 and cut, your mix can just be so much louder. Without and if you boost a fundamental, it will actually sound like there's more low end. You want, because that will breathe more. So just getting rid of like 10, 20 hertz is not a bad thing at all. So I'm going to boost this. Now, I learned from Dave Jordan, he loves 2.5. 2.5 to him is like classic rock EQ. Metal guys definitely like to go to like 7K and really go nuts on that, which I understand. But to me, 2.5 is a great, great area to just kind of get aggressive on. Okay, listen to all the drums together. Okay, I'm going to bring the drum plate in for those that were paying attention and put that in as well. So I'm going to add that to my group because I didn't realize there was a drum plate there till it was too late. So,
it's funny as well when you hit play with this in, with the drum solo, the first thing you're going to say listening at home is that is way too much reverb. Then the rest of the instruments you come in and you go, where did the reverb go?
Yep, yeah, I agree. Catherine's saying goodbye. Bye, Catherine. Yep, I agree.
Lovely day.
Please hit the like button so other people know that we're here. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please go and follow Adam at Hop Pole Studios. Okay. This is Adam's production. I mean, I'm sort of on the fence with the drum verb. I'm thinking to myself, would it have been good if it was slightly shorter? And so I feel the same way. So if we throw in the synth here, for instance, let's see how it feels. Oh, I love Steve Hillage Green as well.
Yeah, it's funny you say with the reverb. I would usually do the same, but trying to be faithful to the original, the reverb was quite a bit longer than you would expect.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was listening to it going, really? And then I did that, and you put it in with the rest of the instruments, and you go, actually, okay, I guess this works.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely not what I would usually go for. So completely agreed.
Pooh's asking where to put it. I would definitely always put it on its own bus. I would not put it on the overall drum mix. I do have an overall drum reverb sometimes when I want to feed little elements of the drums so it feels like it's more in a room, so it just doesn't sound like kick, snare, you know.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing is obviously the hat's getting lost. Let's bring that up. Thanks, Modo. I appreciate it. Yeah, we like doing this. We haven't done many mixing live streams for a while, but I love doing them because we can. I mean, I watch a lot of other channels which have everything always prepared, and sometimes they have other people like do the mix prep for them and mix the song and everything. But I love doing this right from, raw tracks. You just have to be fearless, and not worry about it. It's so much fun. Adam does it too. He does raw mixes from scratch.
I do, and I love it.
Yeah, I love it. Like I always say, the people that do it are the people that can do it. So I'm loving this. So we've figured out the toms. I'll probably let's have a quick listen to the overheads and make a decision on that. Kind of like the sound of those. I mean, out of superstition, I would probably, and we're probably overdoing it by using some of these, some of Eventide's, plugins on everything. But I'm not sure what their simplest EQ low cut would be. But here we go.
I did the same on the overheads.
I mean, I like the overheads in solo, and I think they do sound good. And as part of me, it's like, oh, don't take away the low and the kind of low to low mid area. But at the same time, any phase issues that you might have between the kick and the overheads has just suddenly got rid of, and it allows that the low end to bloom. There was a bunch of BS, and I haven't talked about it in a while, kind of pushed about 5 or 6 years ago when I first started YouTube about don't high pass. The thing is that you don't get more low end when you don't high pass. You get less, because what happens is you have 15 things all with loads of low end, all cancelling each other out, and it just turns into mud. But if you get one pure signal of low end clearly defined, it feels bigger, fatter, and larger and cleaner in the low end. So there's a lot of again, it goes back to our first discussion about how there's a lot of negativity, because negativity sells in this world. Don't do this and don't do that. But the reality is, it's like high passing judiciously, used properly, will give you more low end. And I do like the overhead soloed. And if we were doing more of a jazz song, I probably wouldn't touch it. I probably would just let it breathe. But we're not. We're doing a rock song by a great band. Okay, so for me, everything's starting to sound really good. The snare is what's lacking now. I feel like I need more aggression, and I need more bottom end. I need the body back. And this is where I think for me, I'm going to bus the snare. We're going to start bussing stuff. So we can keep it in mono. So we're going to use bus 1. So we'll create one auxiliary. We'll call it snare bus. Now you can call it bus, sub, or auxiliary. People ask me the difference. They're all the same thing. Snare auxiliary, snare sub, snare bus, whatever you want to call it. When I was living in the UK, we used to call it auxiliary, but there is no right way or wrong way. So let's grab the EQ45 on just the snare top. Oh, you know what? Maybe we should go for the E channel. Well, you know what? We'll start with that. We'll start with just this. Whoops, I have to hear the bus. Now, as I was talking about, Jack got me using Pultex in a different way. So anywhere like 60 to 100 and boosting. So let's go around about 100 and start fishing around. Now, this is very high tuned, so I'm already at 120 and I'm not hearing much of a low end boost, but I think it's going to need it. Let's increase the width. Now there's a default at 8K here. Now I'm hearing an unevenness in the snare, which is totally understandable. Sometimes it's got a lot of body, sometimes it's got a lot of ring, sometimes it's got a lot of top, but it's varying. You know, it's like, so this is where, you know, compression starts coming in. Now I am going to go, I don't know this E channel, so I'm going to go and open it up.
E channel. Show me E channel.
Ah, okay. So it's a 5-band parametric EQ with a compressor and a gate. All right.
Ooh, with a okay. So
and saturation and de-essing.
Cool. I think I used a very gentle gate on the snare, but that's because with the snare being a very, very loud snare, the benefit I find when you're tracking drummers, try and get them to use the loudest snare you can in a rock context. Because that means that the preamp gain can be so low, the bleed is almost nothing. It's great.
Like all things at Eventide, it does about 1 billion things. It's interesting. We go from one of their modeling of one of their earliest pieces of equipment, and as soon as you get to the modern stuff, it's like insane. It's like the H9000 that we have is literally the most comprehensive multi-effects unit ever made, and the people that use it are like film composers and mixing, surround sound and immersive audio people, because it does 1,000 things.
I'm pretty sure if you've got 2 or 3 of them, you can use them to get to space.
Probably yes. I think doesn't Jodie Foster, didn't she actually detect aliens using an H3000?
H3000, that's right. Yeah, in Contact.
So there's a de-esser here, which I didn't engage, but I was.
Nice to see.
I'm not going to use it. I was going to have some fun, because quite often what I do is I'll boost high end like crazy, and then de-ess it back in and try to control it so it's evenly hitting high end. It's a nice little trick. I don't think it's necessary on this, but that's where a split EQ becomes amazing, because you can really control.
Awesome.
Yeah, has anybody ever? What was the name of that movie where Jodie Foster detected aliens using an H3000?
It was Contact, I think.
Contact, that was it. Yep. Thank you for remembering.
That film scared the bejeez out of me when I was younger.
Interesting, it's just not the low end in it, is it? It's just picking up the kick.
Yeah, it's just a very high-tuned snare, I think. Which Neil's original snare was a very high-tuned snare anyway, so if you listen to the original, you might be surprised by how much low end there isn't in the snare, actually. It's weird out of context.
All right, here's no EQ.
Wow.
Here's with the EQ we've applied. So it still sounds like the same high-tuned snare, but now it sounds like we can hear a little bit of the bottom snare, and I wanted to do that with the top because I didn't want to use so much of the bottom snare, because we were deciding it was a little bit indiscriminate on the phase. So what I'm going to do now is put in the snare bottom, but introduce it. I feel like the snare bottom needs some compression, so the sweetness that I'm hearing comes and goes. So I'm going to go and grab the E channel. I'm actually going to copy it down from the snare top. Shh.
Hey, this is a professional trick, man. Save yourself time by doing this.
I mean, I really like it.
I mean, I don't know about you, but in my experience, you're generally paid by the mix, not by the minute. So if you can save time and do the right job, hey.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's hear all the drums together. I'm going to mute the drum plate for a second so I can hear what we've done a little better. Solo in the room. Okay, that's pretty low. I'm going to do the low cut on the overheads a bit higher because I want to try and preserve some of the low end on the snare. There you go. As soon as I went to 230, I started to hear the low end come back in on the snare because there was less phase cancellation going on between the overhead and the snare. Still hearing a little unevenness in the snare, and we don't want to put a sample in there, but you see when he hits pretty soft on here, it's noticeable. So the old-fashioned way to deal with that was to use compression. So I'm copying this down again, so we're going to exaggerate some of the same frequencies.
Oh, something else we could do here is that transformer button. Give that a tick.
Will do.
Because this was all recorded and mixed through the first SSL 4000 series in Canada.
Nice.
So it is exactly the kind of thing that I know you like.
Absolutely. Yeah. What? SS what?
One of them, maybe. Yeah.
One of them. Yeah, so Karen's asking 230. So what I'm doing, I'm not boosting. I'm high passing, low cutting up to 230 on the overheads, because we're not aligning these to the overheads, the snare. So what's happening? There was a bit of phase cancellation going on in the sort of below 230 and below that was making that boost that we did on the snare not quite so audible. So I just high passed a little bit more aggressively on the snare. Oh, thank you, Al Acoustic. You just bought Eric a sandwich. So I'm taking that same EQ and compression, and it's working wonders on the snare. Listen, I'm going to take the high boost down a little bit because it's a little bit too aggressive, but I like the low boost. Listen to the third snare hit now and tell me if you can see whether it's too quiet now, where it was too quiet only 2 minutes ago. Now listen. That snare there was really quiet before. Now there's still a dynamic between it all, but it's just tamed by compression and making it so the hotter ones are drop being dipped about 3 to 4 dB, and then that one just sneaks through, and it's just beautiful. Mm-hmm. So there you go. I mean, there's a prime example of why compression is your friend. And there was many ways that things were compressed, like Adam's talking about with that transformer button. Things used to go through tube microphones into tube or solid state mic pre's, which also happened to have lots of transformers, which sucked up the transients and gave us a little bit more low end. Then it would hit a compressor, which did the same thing: transformers, compression, tape, transformers, tape, transients being rounded off. So by the time they came back, everything was just a little bit kind of smoother and rounder. Mm-hmm. And so we're just doing that now in a digital age. The drums recorded on an inexpensive Focusrite, which doesn't have transformers and tape emulations and compression and tubes and all that stuff. So we're just doing a little bit of that for it,
Yeah, bringing it back.
Bringing it back. Now I'm going to bring that reverb in gently. I'm going to crank the snare a little bit as well on the bus.
One thing I did with the snare, which was a little unusual, is the attack on the compressor. I let loads of it through, like 30, 40 plus milliseconds. And I don't know why. Maybe it was the tuning on this snare, but it just did a thing. It just let that crack through.
Sure.
Because it's so high, maybe it needs it.
Let's try. We'll try it on the master one that we created and see what happens. So I'm going to bring the threshold down now. Cool. Like where it's going, toms are absolutely pumping like crazy. So I'm going to bust those, just like we've done with the snare. So I'm going to create a tom bus. I'm going to call it tom auxiliary this time, just to really confuse everybody. I will call it a bus, a sub, a drink to go with that sandwich. Wow, Eric is getting... What do you want to eat, Eric?
I think we're getting close to some lobster.
Again, he wants lobster. You got to keep. You've got. Eric wants lobster. You're going to have to keep tipping him if he wants a lobster sandwich. Cool. So, believe it or not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the E channel, which I'm kind of digging. Rather lovely. And I'm going to do... First of all, I'm going to do some high passing. So I'm globally controlling that. Going to go 12 dB per octave. So that way I can go up a little higher to about 60, but it's actually giving us a little bump there. Then I'm going to globally go to about 350 and cut it. This is on the tom sub for everybody. Now I'm going to apply a bit of compression. That's crazy. So that was interesting. So I generically just turned on the default setting of the gate there. It worked pretty nicely. And that's on global. That's not on individual elements.
Yeah, I mean, play with the release and thank you, good night.
Yeah, I kind of liked it with the shortest release. Yeah.
I mean, I think it needs a tiny little bit more than that. But
a little bit, yeah.
A lot of it is going to be covered by the drum reverb, actually, which is printed from after a gate. Right. So, yeah, you're on exactly the same lines as I was.
Marvelous.
There it is. Let's go home.
just going to bring the output gain down a little bit. I remember when I was working with my good friend Ulrich Wild on a project maybe 20 years ago at my old studio. He was tracking drums, and we came to do a rough mix, and he's like, "Are those toms too loud?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Wait there. Toms can never be too loud." Because you listen back to that 70s recording, you know, like some of the Queen stuff, and they'll be like doom da doom doom, and the toms are just coming like just like so loud.
Yeah.
But they were used for like stereo width, and you were a kid, and you're like, wow,
yes.
you know.
Death to all but toms. It's funny, when you started mixing the toms, I was looking at going, this is cool, but it's not exactly how I did it. And by the time you've done this as well, this is almost exactly how I did it.
Good. Cool. So those of you paying attention, I did just increase the plug-in output on the snare on the E channel. I put it up by 2 dB. So just got that snare poking out, and then I cut the tom volume by a similar amount. So I think it's just a little bit more even now. Now, we are working a lot in solo, and I know, and yes, I agree, you shouldn't work in solo. However, it's really hard to teach and learn stuff when you're not working in solo. As much as, you know, Bob Clearmountain, who's inarguably the greatest mixer ever, he barely solos, ever. And he just mixes, and I believe him, and I've watched him, and it's the truth. And I think we could do that, but it wouldn't really help everybody. So going on to the bass here, we can just do a couple of really dumb things. So the bass is very dynamic. I don't know if I need to individually compress elements, because even though it's dynamic, it's not like you're spiking me with, you know, huge differences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to the bass DI first. Now listen to Sam's amp. Yeah, you got me a little confused here, Adam. You see, I like the low end that's coming out of the Sans amp because it's quite consistent. However, it's also what gives us all the personality. So maybe, just to really blow everybody's mind, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the bass Sans amp and I'm going to duplicate it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the EQ. I'll just go to the EQ 45 and do a high cut. How low is it going to let me go? 400? Let's have a listen. So I've boosted 80 hertz, and this is on a duplicate of the Sans amp, because the way that it's compressing through the Sans amp is actually giving me more even low end. So I'm using that for my low end. Oh wow! So we're doing a giveaway. So did you put that underneath the video as well? So you can go and win the H9 series bundle or the split EQ. Marvelous. Go and enter. Eric will keep putting it up there. So it's kind of blown up. But so now what I'm going to do is, because I'm all into checking, I'm going to take that same EQ that I did and put it on the DI and see whether that could be emulated on the DI. No, I don't think it's got the consistent low end that I want because of how aggressively it's played, which is okay. It's not a slight to you at all. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to have, let's put those two things together and have a listen. Now, just to really blow everybody's mind and just think this man's crazy, I'm going to go and get the same EQ and do this. So now what it's doing is it's allowing me to have control between the lows and the highs of those two things. The next thing I'm going to do is grab, and obviously we're in Pro Tools and it allows us to did I just open it up or not? Did I not? Did I hit the wrong button? Probably.
It's catchy, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
And for the music nerds at home, that section is in, I think it's 7/16. It's in a completely crazy time signature. But you don't think about it because you just go better, 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 because that's the joy of a good hook. You don't count it, you just sing it.
So I'm going to use some. I agree entirely. So now we're compressing that quite aggressively so that we can get, we can get the low end to be just consistent each time. Now I'm actually going to high pass quite aggressively here. Sorry, low pass. Maybe it won't allow me to go down that low. All right, that's interesting. I'm going to grab the E channel and put it on the DI. You know what? Let's do something fun. The omnipressor, probably I should say for something really, really stupid. What's Crush Station? I don't know what this is.
Oh, Crush Station. That sounds fun. Oh, it's one of the H9s. That is going to literally crush it to heck and back. Oh. Whoa. That's pretty big sounding. So actually, one of the guys, Paul, in chat has just suggested a particular plugin to use, which is from a different brand that we did a video about very recently, you and me, Warren, the double tap plugin.
Oh, yeah?
That is exactly what I used. I busted two together, used double tap, and I used a bit of a saturation plugin, and that's it. I was like, done.
Nice.
And you've just gone about it the more traditional way, I guess.
Well, we sort of did it normally. So normally what you would do in this situation is you take the bass DI because it has the most consistent, clean low end. But because, Adam's, emulating the way Geddy played.
Out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't that consistent low end. Now, he could get in there and compress and EQ and compress and EQ and get a clean low end out of the DI. But I thought I'd just cheat and use the Sans amp, and it seems to work great.
Yeah, funnily enough, if you listen to the original album, the bass doesn't have a great deal of low end. I think it's because he was so aggressive with it that they just EQ'd around that and just went, well, there you go then.
Nice. Well, I'm going to bust the bass elements together. So we'll go to bus 2 because it's not being used yet. I like to be nice and organized.
Funnily enough, even though the original mix didn't have that much low end, I think you and I both independently have gone for a fuller, more modern low end.
I agree. Yep.
Just because it doesn't work presenting it as this kind of thin low end, thin kind of 1980s track.
Yeah.
People would be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one. You go back to some of that, some of the mid-period, mid-70s Zeppelin stuff. It sounds absolutely immense, with the exception of you don't hear that kind of 40 and 60 hertz on Bonham's kick that we're so used to hearing now in modern music. So, yeah, it's always interesting, that stuff. Okay, so what else am I looking for?
Someone mentioned Ultra Channel?
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Down at the bottom. Oh, yes.
That's exactly
there we go. The everything.
Now, they were saying you can reorder it, so I could go EQ into it.
Oh, wow.
But I don't see how to do that. Anybody know?
When they're lit up, do you just drag the corner? Because I can see at the top left there's a little tab in the corner.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Oh, it's not doing it.
Oh, yeah, it is. You just have to do it in stages.
Oh, okay.
Yay! There it is. Right, I'm going to EQ into compression. Now, I love 3K on bass. That's where I think all the bite is. So if I go around here. Now, typically, I would do 750, 850, 1K, 1.5, and I might still do that. But let's just kind of keep going in this way. The thing is about mixing is that you don't necessarily have to go in there and apply really dramatic EQ until you start bringing other elements in. So here I'm like getting the bass to sound really nice against the drums. But once I put the guitars in, I might go, oh, I want a bit more nose and mid-range. But I won't do that before putting the guitars in because it might not be the right thing to do. But in my back of my mind, I'm thinking, I've got that trick where I can put a bit of 750, 850, 1K and 1.5 to just make it nosy. But at the moment, I'm not thinking that way. I'm thinking that way, but I'm not doing it. That's what I should say. Now I've high passed 5.5K here, 5K, because I don't need it. I don't need it on the bass, but I can get that 3K.
Ooh, them's fighting words.
Oh, you went above 5K on the boost?
Well, it's not bass, it's Geddy Lee.
I know. Well, so how high would you go?
I went all the way up. I did a high shelf from 4K upwards and just cranked the whole damn thing.
I'm at 3K. All right, so I'm going to split the difference on 8.
But then he has an unusual tone. So 99 times out of 100, absolutely, I would do what you did. But
okay, so I'm going to 3K and I'm making it wider, and I'm going to 8K and low passing 8K. So that's without the crush station. So I'm going to. You're the producer. What do you prefer? Do you prefer it with or without? Here's without. With.
And with. I definitely prefer it with.
Oh, you do? Okay.
We might find that once the guitars are in, we need to dip a little bit the low mid back out, but that will come to that.
Okay, let's put the guitars in.
Just because the bass is so thick.
Right, here's the guitars in. I'm taking the crush station off again, listening. Now we have the guitars in. I think tonally I like it without, but I feel like that DI needs to be compressed. So I'm going to turn the crush station off because you did so much with the Sans amp that we can get it from there. And I'm
it's quite a hairy, well kind of compressed tone, I guess, already. So
yeah.
I mean, it's emulating an Ampeg SVT and a Marshall Plexi on 100 already. So it's kind of self-compressing in a way. Yeah,
I agree. So I'm just seeing what could be our most generic. I suppose it's just going back to the E channel.
And someone asked, is that a double-tracked stereo guitar? It is. So it's one left, one right as a single channel.
I agree. Acme Yako says it helps to think with Rush, almost think of the bass as a bass and rhythm guitar, sort of, and Alex guitar is playing higher over the top, riffing the sound of the bass. Yeah, I agree. It makes me think of the first time I discovered that all the rhythm guitar playing in Motorhead was actually Lemmy.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
I didn't know. I just thought that was the most nasty guitar sound I ever heard, and then I got to hear the tracks in solo, and the bass is like, I was like, oh. And then I met Cameron, and Cameron had the Marshall amp, the Marshall that Lemmy used, and it was just set to pure distortion, and it was like, oh. So Lemmy was the rhythm guitar player and the bass player, and it feels like Geddy's the same thing.
I think it's very similar.
Somebody's saying they think the release is a little fast on the bass. I think I like it like this.
No, if you make the release any slower, we'll get obvious pumping artifacts, and we do not want that.
Yeah, that's got the sponge I want. I want the bass to be pow, 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 pow. And I think I
Can
feel
we get
like
a bit more of that distortion back out on the bass, because it sounds a little polite now.
Sure.
That's an artistic thing, not a mix thing.
Maybe we do this.
The crustacean. Oh. Oh, yeah. Crustacean.
that too much? Enough?
I think once put the guitars in. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I have to use the bathroom. So if you want to take the floor, you know, what we normally do is we have like Eric tell a joke. So I don't know, Eric, you want to get up here and hang out with Adam for a bit? Or you want to keep checking Tinder? Oh, I mean, grind. No, not that busted. Busted. All right, I've got to use the bathroom. Bathroom break. If you haven't already, please hit the producers meeting. No, the producer's staying on here. Oh, yeah, you mean the producer?
Business meeting. Yeah.
Eric's going to talk about how he would have done it.
Man, so you would have just replaced the kick with an 808, right? And just...
Absolutely, the whole way through. How's it going? Adam?
Yeah, good. I'm really enjoying this. I mean, we put this together kind of last minute, didn't we? And saying because after the video went out for the main songs that change music, me and Warren were saying this is great. We should mix this on stream, and it's just come together like whoa. Yeah, it's
even the setup band on OBS, which is kind of like, all right, how do I make this work? But because I'm still learning OBS, like the stream you guys are all seeing, everyone's seeing, is we're using OBS, and it's just it's a whole new thing, a whole new world for me still, and there's a lot to do. I just barely learned about the plugins that you can put on OBS, and that's just like, oh my god, yes.
Oh, wait till you learn about installing like custom extra stuff. Like I have on my podcast, I use OBS, and I have a little kind of wave meters at the bottom that move when I talk.
That's cool. You see,
there's so much stuff that there's like a whole repository of these cool little things, and you can just install them all and go, fun.
There's even like right now, like when Warren's like, oh, I have to use the restroom, let's have a break, and there's like where you can have like a little break commercial, and it'll have like a video play instead, and then people could just watch that video, and it could be like of anything. It could be even the performances that we make of like this song or anything like that. That we could just play through that stuff. It's so cool. It's crazy. It's nuts.
If you're using a powerful enough machine as well, you can use it in studio mode, which means that you get a preview screen. And you can change everything on the fly, and then just switch, and then so we don't have to see what's behind the scenes as you change stuff.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I've got going on as a studio.
Oh, you got it up.
I'm getting used to that as well. So watch. I could even just turn, just so everyone knows what's going on. Here is a live view of behind the scenes. So we have a PCU going on right here. There's the PC. Warren's over there. The camera is on top of here, and this is the studio mode. So the live view is there, and then the preview is on the left side that I can edit, and then I'm monitoring the stream itself over here, and listening off the stream. So like that, I hear exactly what you guys are hearing, and I can check the chat. So when you guys are saying stuff, I'm able to
you got it all going on.
Yeah.
Russell said in chat that my camera's out of focus. It's not out of focus. It's because my camera is going live from England over to LA and then on the stream and then back out. The internet in your place isn't the best ever, right? So the priority is making sure the stream of Pro Tools and Warren comes through to you guys at home as clear as possible. The fact that I'm in here is great, but my webcam because of Zoom is kind of like downgraded a little bit, but that's the sacrifice to make sure the stream is good, because we need to make sure the stream is good.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, it's a fair point, but it's not this camera, because this is like a nice Lumix camera. But by the time it's been from me to Warren's place back out to you, some sacrifice was made somewhere along the way.
Yep.
Do you like sushi?
Do I like sushi?
Yeah.
I love sushi.
Do you love the crustacean plugin?
The crustacean. Everyone, because when you say the crustacean plugin, everyone's saying crustacean. Like, yeah, I know. That's hilarious. I love it.
It doesn't leave you feeling a little bit crabby.
Good. Here comes the jokes.
There we go. I mean, someone had to get him in at some point.
Right?
Yeah. Oh god, SpongeBob jokes are coming. Yeah. Funnily enough, Lee has just asked me a question that's exactly the same about the camera being out of focus. It is just a resolution thing, I think. I watched the Academy video of Steve Albini when that came out, and that was
a lot
similar.
more excessively expensive than we got.
Oh no!
I ordered him some sushi. It's his birthday. It's not his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday!
No, it's not. It's not his birthday. I'm being silly. I ordered him a lot more expensive meal than that. So if anybody wants to contribute, I appreciate it. But he's getting spoiled.
Reminds me of a song from Saturday Morning TV, which was, "It's not your birthday today. We don't care anyway. You won't get any presents." And so on and so on. It's brilliant.
Hey, I've got to say, Jamie's guitar tone is so good. I don't know if it needs much more, except maybe a little bit of brightening.
Yeah,
Tiny bit.
I didn't do much. What did I do? I used a little bit of saturation because it was quite toppy compared to the original.
Okay.
It's surprising, but it was definitely a Rush thing at that time, is that the guitars were really mid-focused.
Yeah, that was.
I think that's because the synths were going on, the drum fills were going on.
So much of the rock
of
of that time sounds like that, doesn't it? It all sounds like
it's like
super...
radio effecty type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondered about that as a kid, is like, how did they do that and why? But in context, it kind of works.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it pretty similarly. Eric, would you mind answering this? It might be my doctor's appointment. Just to confirm. I'm going to leave it for the time being. All right, I'm going to listen with the bass synth in. If it's saying 9 a.m. on the 8th, you can just confirm.
Mean stride.
Someone was just asking what I think of the Jones Scanlon monitors, and so I was like, "Oh, I should listen." Sounds really good. I'm really happy. Yeah, this is great, and I suppose this is a good lesson in the less is more. Like, we're not doing a huge amount here.
It's such a good arrangement, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, there's the bass synth stuff, and then there's the real bass, but it's only ever one at once, so the low end is filled but not confusing. Things like that. It's a very clever arrangement.
So I was asking, am I using... the headphones I'm using today are Blues, which we had the very, 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 very sad announcement that they are no longer making these headphones. We found that out because we tried to get our good friend Jamie Humphries a pair. So Eric reached out, and what did they say? They just said, sorry, we don't make them anymore.
Yeah, so they were just going through their stock, and their stock's out, so they're going to let us know if they have anything that comes up.
But they're not making any headphones?
That's what it sounded like in the email.
Wow. These were so popular.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's really weird. We had so many people I know bought them. Anyway.
So many companies are having production problems recently. It's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm using the Blues, the Mix 5s. We love them. They sound great. Everybody we know has them. Everybody we work with uses them. So we're on the lookout for a new company. I mean, Bayer have always been a big fan. Growing up in the UK, of course, everybody had a pair of DT100s. I think I have 4 pairs in various states of disrepair. But it's been around since the 70s. What are you using, Adam?
I'm using the good old Sennheiser HD 650s. The same pair, and they are rusty on the outsides that I've had for 10 years, and they are still great.
Yeah, I'm going to have to... Yeah. It's good. It's going to be interesting. We're going to have to find a new company because we got a lot of pairs. I mean, I have a pair. My son has a pair. Eric has a pair. Connor has a pair. Caitlin has a pair.
Of Austrian Audio 55s around here somewhere that I use quite a lot to check mixes. They're so brutal in the mid range, but the 65s apparently are much more kind of even and not so like your mix must change or
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Audio-Technica make great headphones. Bayer make great headphones. Sennheiser make great headphones. But whatever we get, we're going to have to get like 20 pairs. So that's the reason why it's not something we take lightly. Because, yeah, literally there's about 6 or 7 members of our team that all have the same headphones. So, all right, I'm going to put the vocal in.
A modern day warrior, me means try. Today's Tom Sawyer, me means pride.
I don't know, mate. I don't think there's much to do to your vocal. It's
Awesome.
I mean, what did you do? I mean, I don't even know.
That was straight into a tube preamp, a Drama preamp, and that's it. It's just a Lewitt 940. It's just a great mic.
Isn't Drama a Northern English company? Are they in the North?
I don't know where they're from. Let me have a look.
Oh, are they? Oh, they've Scott. Oh, it's just terrible. I can't remember.
Drama are from Rotherham, so they are Yorkshire, so they are North England. Yeah,
That's what I thought. Yeah. There you go. Wow, fantastic.
and the
modern day
1960s is a great preamp. I know that the Bring Me the Horizons new album, all the vocals on that were through a Drama 1960. Ramesh from what's his name? Ramesh Dodanganoda. Is that how you pronounce his name? He's big name in the UK. He swears by that for vocals. And I used one when I was 18 and went, yep, I want one.
So you use the Lewitt. I said Lewitt. The Lewitt LCT 940 into the Drama.
That's
Great.
it.
All right.
A modern day warrior, me means try. Today's Tom Sawyer, me means pride. No, his mind is not for rent. Don't put him down as arrogant. His reserve a quiet defense, writing out the day's events. The river. What you say about his company
I think that string synth is supposed to be quite a bit lower down. It's not supposed to be a main instrument.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds great. It's just the arrangement wise, it's supposed to be further back.
Yeah, Lisa's saying it sounds close to finished. Yeah, it really is close to finished. We haven't done anything on the vocal at all. We're just using it as it is.
What you say about his company is what you say about society. Catch the
All right, I'm going to do a little silliness here.
Oh, here comes Silly Warren.
Well, I'm just going to go. I'm going to the E channel, and I'm going to. So you see what I did? I went to just under 6K, and I just de-essed it. So just trying to control, because I like the 2.5 that we put on because it sounds like classic rock, but the kick itself has got like a 5, 6,
an
7.
aggression, yeah.
It just doesn't sound like a classic rock kick. So I just use a de-esser to duck it when it gets too much. Here's a before. Here's an after. In the mix. Now, it's a catch-22. Like we talked about near the beginning,
Yeah,
Adam brought it up. We're trying to get to this place where we need it to sound reminiscent of the original version. But quite often with some of the 70s and early 80s rock, as much as we absolutely love it, it was mixed in a way where there was not excessive amounts of low end and not excessive amounts of high end, which we are so used to now. Most of the way people were listening to music, and I know we all like to joke and say MP3s suck and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not going to get into a fight about it, but most people used to listen to music on AM radios. You know, not everybody, or or cassette even, which was destroying half the high end. And it just didn't have the low lows and the high highs that we're used to now. Not everybody had a, £10,000, $10,000, 70s a wire system with huge speakers. Most of my friends' houses had crappy little hi-fis. So we're trying to get it to sound modern and also sound classic. Sorry.
That's okay. Here's an extra weirdness with the history of this particular album that may explain a few things. Do you know the Sony Dash systems, the tape machines that were not actually analog tape from the 80s? Yep. So Paul Northfield, the engineer for this album, reckons that this was recorded on a Sony Dash system, which was very, very early, not analog tape. The Wikipedia article says that the Dash systems were started in early 82. It's possible that maybe they had a prototype unit. Don't know. I mean, they had the first SSL desk in Canada. Who knows? But that would explain a lot because it doesn't have that tape fullness on the low end, this album, like a lot of the albums of the era did. It's quite kind of controlled and clinical and very much reminiscent of the late 80s stuff, even though it was years earlier. So that might be some historical kind of insight into why the album sounds so clean / not fat, that kind of thing. Yeah,
and as Paul said, you couldn't put too much low end on vinyl. Exactly. You just couldn't do it. There was no... the stylus, the needle, the stylus would just pop out. They would just
very much so,
vibrate. So we're trying to find that happy balance where it sounds modern enough, so because I'm going to throw Eric under the bus, but I think you've been with me maybe a year or so, long time ago, back in the early 1830s. And I said to you, I was like, do you like Led Zeppelin? You were like, yeah. And I was like, it was like a hesitation. And I was like, what is it about Led Zeppelin? And he goes, it just sounds old-fashioned. Because, he grew up on Metallica and After, where like extended low end, especially the later Metallica stuff and everything. And it's all just got massive low end and it's super aggressive and really, really loud. And he might like the songs and stuff with Led Zeppelin, but to a younger person, it does sound a little bit old fashioned. It's a little bit like us when we were kids in the 80s, listening to music from the 50s and thinking, oh, it's all mono and old fashioned sounding. Well, we grew up loving Led Zeppelin. I grew up loving Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. I still think The Wall sounds totally modern, so that's irrelevant. Wall was recorded in 79 and still sounds like so modern. So does Scary Monsters by David Bowie, recorded in 79, still sounds really modern. There are albums that completely defy all of the stuff we're talking about, and all the Peter Gabriel stuff, But generally speaking, albums from that period didn't have the extended low frequency and high frequency response we have now. And they also weren't as necessarily printed as loud, So, to a young person's ears, they can tell it's from another generation. And so, anyway, I'm waffling on about this for too long, but everybody understands our point. It's like we're trying to get that happy medium between sounding contemporary, but also sounding classic. Okay, I'm going to listen a bit more. I think we're pretty close to having something that I would probably say is you come back to. Like you've got it 90% of the way there, and then you come back to with fresh ears and take it over the finish line. That's where I think we're at. Has everybody downloaded the multi-tracks, and have you all entered to win some plugins? Eric will re-put that up. Let's have a listen to all the synth stuff happening here. I know Lisa was pointing out. Let's go to that section. Just Adam says, if Zepp sounds old-fashioned, then stick me in the old folks' home. I don't think it sounds old-fashioned because I grew up at a time when that was a defining style of music. I think what it is to a young person coming up, being hit with really, really loud digital full-range music, it does. It doesn't sound just in the same way that we grew up in 70s and 80s. I'm a Gen Xer, so obviously, 70s and 80s was my time, and then made music in the 90s on. But growing up at that period, listening to music from the 50s and even a lot of the 60s just sounded old-fashioned. It doesn't mean it's old-fashioned and it's dated or it's still classy and timeless. We've got to think about it in context of what kids are listening to now.
As his skies are wide. Today's Tom Sawyer, he gets high on you. When the space he invades, he gets by on you.
It's funny, that guitar really sits now, and I think that's partly because it went through the vocal reverb as well. I think a lot of the elements of the mix went through the vocal reverb, which was an EMT 250, the old R2D2s.
Yep.
With a massive pre-delay on it. So it sounds like it's got a delay on, even though it is just the reverb just coming 200 almost milliseconds later. So it gives it a slap-backy feel plus a reverb and leaves space for whatever element is hitting it. All good tricks when you're trying to make a big sounding mix without a mushy sounding mix.
Nice. Fantastic. All right, well, let's keep listening on from that solo. And don't forget, we'll be leaving soon. So before you go, make sure to download the multi-tracks and enter to win some plugins. There is, I understand your question, Ray, and I don't disagree. But at the same time, you're talking about modern pop music compared with classic rock. I mean, there's still lots of rock bands writing great stuff. It's just not what gets played on the radio. I know there's a lot of people who won't say who they are like to rant on how bad modern music is, but they always just take the top 40 pop music chart and then go, it's not as good as Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. It's like, yeah, but
a large amount of the top 40 never was.
Yeah, unfortunately, growing up, there was a lot of crap in the charts when I was a kid as well, but there was a lot of great stuff as well. It's just, what makes into the kind of a young, youthful teenager and beyond. I can't talk about Justin Bieber or, something like that and then say compare it to Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin. It's just not a fair conversation, because my son is 15 and his favorite band is Steely Dan. And nice. I didn't initiate him into it. His friends like bands like Steely Dan and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, and they like jazz, and they like blues, and they like contemporary artists that play that kind of stuff as well. But then there's a whole subset of kids at his school, just like there was at my school, that only listen to top 40 pop music. And I think that's been skewed. I think it's one of those arguments that people do online to go, yeah, modern music sucks. And then they only play top 40 dance music. When I was a kid, I'm sure there's lots of people from the UK here. You remember you would turn on to Capital Radio during the day and it was all just top 40 pop music. But then you go to Radio 1 in the evening and it was amazing. You had Rock On Tommy, and he would play Stairway to Heaven every single night. It's always been that way. So I think, look, it's a good thing to do. Rant and create videos about bad pop music and get more people to follow you. I get it. But to me, it's all about positivity. My son, if he can discover and he and his friends Steely Dan on their own without me putting it down their throat, I think that's really good. Otherwise, as you say, as we all say, you're preaching to an echo chamber. You're constantly trying to reinforce things because it helps build up, this feeling. I want to bring young people in and have them experience great music without the kind of wagging finger of, back in the 70s, we were much better than you kids. Yeah, I love Pink Floyd. I love Steely Dan. I love all that stuff from the 70s, but I want them to discover it and realize that, we can make music like that as well. Oh, that was my rant. Oh, dear. What do you think about that, Adam?
I completely agree. When someone in chat said, "Oh, the pop songs in the '70s were better," no, they weren't. You just remember the good ones. I mean,
Oh,
if
there
I
were some
started singing,
terrible ones in the
Grandpa, we love you. Grandpa, we do, or something like that. Oh, there was some awful, awful stuff, and nobody remembers the 20s, 30s in the charts that went in every week and disappeared because the band were rubbish.
Yeah, there was some absolute crap when I was a kid.
Been the same forever.
Yeah, I can't remember. There was like, they took a '60s year and it was really great, and it had like Beatles Beatles and Stones were in the top 10, but the number one single was Herman's Hermits, like "Everybody's Gone to the Moon" or something like that, and that was actually the biggest selling single of that year. So it's just like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, all the novelty hits growing up. Remember in the UK with the number one novelty hits, you know?
Yeah, someone said the Birdie song and
The Birdie
Superman
song,
and...
Star trekking across the universe, always flying forward, never in reverse.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim.
It was just... Spitting Image. What was the Spitting Image one?
Stick a deck chair up your nose.
Stick a deck chair up your nose and bury all your clothes. Drive a jumbo jet and then bury all your clothes. That was it, yeah. Fly. Oh, it's just like, these were number one singles, people. You know, and even some of the big bands that had hits, they weren't always necessarily the best songs. They were just whatever. But there's great music out there. I just don't see any benefit of trashing the younger generation making music other than to just reinforce your already pre-existing fan base. I mean, we should be here, all of us as producers and engineers on this call, everybody here, we should be here encouraging young people to listen to great music and helping them and educate them, as Theo said, not about like going, "You kids," I'm such a strong, if you get me alone and talk about this stuff, I'm very passionate about that. And it's what really, really helps. Let's bring people in. Let's not alienate them with our, superior ways of genius. Plus we're always, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. If I start wagging my finger and telling everybody that modern music sucks, what does that mean? I've had a few number one albums and a few number one singles. Yeah. But I didn't have number one albums and number one singles in 1969 when people were breaking down barriers. I had the Fray were number one. It was great. We had a great week. We sold 185,000 records. I remember being so unbelievably happy about it. In our first week, it was a wonderful experience. And the Fray are fantastic, but they're not Led Zeppelin. They're not Pink Floyd. I'm not going to preach like I changed music. No, I just had success at a period. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So
the other thing that a lot of people seem to forget about a lot of the big name bands is that up until maybe the later parts of each one's career, most of the time they would be on tour for 18 weeks, 28 weeks, and then they would be thrown into a recording studio and go, "Right, you've got 3 weeks, give me an album now." And that would happen again and again and again to people like Led Zeppelin up until they got to like Led Zeppelin 4 maybe. It would happen. It definitely happened to Rush up until almost the 90s. It happened to all the big bands like that, where they would just be like, "Right, here you go." And if they had time to play with the new technology, great. But generally they didn't. They turn up with their guitars. They'd go, "Clock's ticking, boys. Let's go."
Yep, totally.
So that's the kind of thing. And then the producers would be the ones who had the new shiny toys, which is part of what I find interesting as a recording nerd, that I can hear if you listen to a band's catalog, you go album to album to album, and you can go, it's the same band. What's changed? And sometimes it is a maturing of the musical stuff, which is the band, but sometimes it's new production methods, new gear, that kind of thing. And I can hear it and I can go, well, why does this sound different? And for me, that's as much an audio education as the band themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that teaches me kind of, this is how they got that big, fat, thick thing. And it might be that they did it on purpose. It might be that's the only gear available to them at the time.
Yeah.
And as a bit of an audio historian, I find that fascinating, because then if I go to a modern band and they go, I really want that fat, thick, low end, I can go, right, tape emulation or whatever it may be that's called for. And that's how I think on mixes. And I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone said to me now, record a band, make them sound like Rush from 1980, I'd be like, that's weird. No, that the new band should sound like the new band. But I also love being able to learn how to do these kind of mixes like it was 1980 all over again with that mindset, because then I can approach things in kind of new ways based on the old ways.
Yep. Yeah, when I'm making records with Jack Douglas, he doesn't want a kick drum that cuts off at 80 hertz. Nope.
Oh no.
He wants a big, booming, massive kick drum. And he made rocks and toys in the attic. So if you guys want to have a fight with him, no, I'm just joking. But my point is like, he wants to use that extended low end. He said he was really disappointed because they would mix records, sometimes really massively, to only have them being mastered with all the low end wiped off. So that's another thing that's important. It's a bit like the whole immersive conversation where everybody says, you know, those guys that made those records never intended it to be heard that way. And yet you ask those guys, not the opinion, but you actually ask the guys, and they're like, heck yeah, if we could have maintained and had stuff around us and done, we would have been doing it. We just didn't have that choice. And I think that this is the thing, you know, I think all of us, myself included, are guilty of this. We speak for people, but when you actually go back to the people that made those records, they're like, no, wrong, and wrong. I mean, I've made records and I've read articles on how I made the record. You know, I'm like, I didn't do that. But now it's fact because somebody else said it, you know.
Yeah.
But the important thing to remember is that I wasn't saying that Led Zeppelin sound old-fashioned. No, I never said that. What I said was, to Eric's age group, it sounds old-fashioned. So for us, we have to remember that we want to keep the integrity of what we love about 60s and 70s recordings, but we want them to have in a more extended low and high end so that the younger people that are listening to the music that we're making could be drawn in. You know, if we're just going to be so obsessed about recreating the 70s, then we're going to end up with these really narrow sounding records which do not translate. So that's the point. And as a producer, an engineer, and a mixer, we need to listen to the people that buy the music. What do they want? How can we help them and help ourselves at the same time? How can we create something that's remarkably creative, but also translates to a massive amount of population? And that's why Steely Dan seemed to win, because those recorded so well. Those records were recorded so amazingly.
Yeah, timeless.
All right.
Really good example just before we go actually is like taking the lessons away from these classic tracks without doing it exactly. Good one is When the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin. If you listen to that without the nostalgia glasses for a minute, it's got nothing below about 100 hertz and nothing above about 10K. It's radio. It's like, it sounds like it's through an AM radio. But the song is incredible, and part of the production of it is incredible. That big drum sound, that big, and it's all just right in your face, almost mono. I think it might actually be mono, and it's just a big wall of noise. But if we take the lessons of here's how we did those drums and that kind of thing and transplant them onto modern production, we get things that the artist goes, that's incredible. Yeah,
it's a whole discussion about, you know, having too many tracks. Well, if you listen to like Bohemian Rhapsody or anything like that with layered background vocals, if you spread that out on individual tracks like you can now, it's well over 100 tracks.
Wow.
It's just they would bounce everything together. You know, the methodology has always been there. You just did what you could do. You know, Beatles would sync 2 4-tracks machines, or they would bounce things onto other reels and then bring it back in. There was all kinds of stuff that they used to do. It really... I think if, you know, the Beatles had excessive tracks, more tracks, they would have used them. They would have used them creatively. It's always easy to blame the technology. It's, you know, it's not about the technology. It's about how you use it. It really is. Like, because you can edit doesn't mean you should. Because you can tune doesn't mean you should. It's just, when do you do these things? When do you tune something? When do you edit something? When do you use more than one mic on something? When do you double mic on it? The way... Jay Messina and Jack used to record guitars. They had 4 to 5 microphones on the guitar. Shelley had 3 microphones on every guitar. He'd have one on one speaker, one on another, and one pulled back about 6 feet, and then he would blend it together. That was his guitar sound. So it's this sort of... It wasn't a case of like everybody used to be really talented in the 70s and now everybody sucks, which is obviously what we're hearing all the time. What it was is just like there was more emphasis on capturing great performances, as somebody's pointing out, bands rehearsing bands rehearsing before they went into a studio, or more importantly, bands having budgets to be in the studio for a long time to get it right. And that's the problem with our industry now, is there is no budget for a band to go into a studio for 6 weeks to make an album anymore. You know, even the big guys are making albums in 2 to 3 weeks, start to finish. So, you know, all right. And as Mad Maxit 2 says, it's all about the song, the song, the song, and the song. What else we got going on here? There was a couple of really great questions.
So much in the chat today. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride.
Paul says you've done a good job so far. Spot on, our kids. Thanks, our kids. All right, one more listen, and then we're going to hit the road. And I think our food might be here any minute. 3 minutes. How long's the song?
Quick.
How long's the song?
3.5 minutes.
3.5 minutes. Here goes. Can you have somebody be ready to get the
Modern
phone?
day warrior, me stride. Today's Tom Sawyer, me pride. No, his mind is not for rent. Don't put him down as arrogant. His reserve a quiet defense, writing out the day's events. The river. What you say about his company is what you say about society. Catch the mist, catch the myth, catch the mystery, catch the drift. The world is love and life are deep. Maybe as his skies are wide. Today's Tom Sawyer, he gets high on you. When the space he invades, he gets by on you. No, his mind is not for rent to any god or government. Always hope for your discontent. He knows dangers are permanent, but changes. What you say about his company is what you say about society. Catch the witness, catch the whip, catch the spirit, catch the spit. The world is love and life are deep. Maybe as his eyes are wide. Exit the warrior, today's Tom Sawyer. He gets high on you, and the energy you trade, he gets right on to the friction of the day.
everybody. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, please go to Adam's channel and check it out, Hot Bowl Studios. He did a full playthrough and, spent a long time mixing it and obviously produced the track and did an incredible job. This would be a situation, this is probably about an hour's worth of real mixing has got into this because we did so much talking and describing. But yeah, what I would do now is I'd take a break and then I'd come back to it with fresh ears and do lots of tweaks. To me, this is like one stage from a static mix. It's like a static plus some basic EQ. So we haven't finished the mix, but it's a great place to start and come back and revisit. I'm going to have some lunch now. It's been a good 3 hours hanging out with all your good selves. Adam, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Anytime.
Absolutely. A lot of fun. Thank you, everybody. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, hedor, adio, what do I say? Oh, ciao. I always forget ciao. People always say you should be saying ciao. Thank you all for coming in and checking this out. Don't forget to enter to win these plugins. There's plugins to win. Eric will put that up now.
I'm getting there. You gotta
I know, just copy and paste. Go on.
Eric,
you can do it, Eric. I'm just going to put it up now. He's going to put it. It's get up. Is it? Is it up yet?
It's there. Delay.
Delay.
And there it is. And as you can see there, enter to win. So Anita goes pressure. Enter to win. And of course, download the multi-tracks and mix Adam's rather wonderful production yourself. And you can learn from this. You can do other stuff. Thank you, Eventide, for letting us give away some plugins. I really appreciate it. So long. Thanks, everyone. You rock.